this month's learning experience really focuses on what do you need to do to decolonize your space, to decolonize yourself in your life, your spirit, your soul, your inner being. And so this learning experience is going to talk about one way to do that. And one way of decolonizing yourself and your space and your praxis, is to return to ancestral traditions, to ancestral ways of being, to ancestral ways of thinking, right? And I'm just going to name a few ways in which we can do that. One way to return to ancestral ways of being is by returning to ancestral rituals and traditions. What are your ancestral rituals and traditions? For me, it has been very healing to return to the ritual of celebrating Dia de Muertos, or Day of the Dead, putting up altars, celebrating my ancestors. I have really gone back to using burning copal, or acknowledging the earth when I make food. My grandma, whenever she makes tortillas, and she has her like little oven, and her little oven made of mud in Mexico. And so whenever she would make tortillas, she would always burn the first one. And it was this return of like, thank you, Mother Earth, for giving us corn. And the first offering goes back to you, to the earth, as a thank you and as a reminder that it was a gift that was bestowed upon us. Making sure that my daughter understands the powers of té de manzanilla, chamomile tea, or mint tea, té de hierbabuena, that she knows that she can find healing in herbs and leaves and sticks, and stones. Putting our feet in the mud, going back to the ocean. My people are ocean people. And so I always take my daughter back to the ocean. I teach her how to interact with the ocean. I tell her, the ocean has its own life and its desires. And if the ocean doesn't want to be bothered, we really have to learn how to listen and respect their space. And I tell her, you can always find answers in the stillness of coming back to your ancestral calling. And she's Jamaican and Mexican from the coast, so she has the ocean, the ancestral call of the ocean, from both sides of her family. So that's going to be very key for her. So that's one way of decolonizing, is returning back to ancestral rituals and ancestral traditions. Another way of returning to of decolonizing is it's really challenging, but it's very important to find a fine balance between questioning our people's traditions, our people's ways of being, and our families' ways of doing things, because sometimes they're toxic and they're harmful, right? So how do we learn how to question those things and at the same time still be able to not separate ourselves from our people and not separate ourselves from our roots? How do we do that? How do we question? How do we further our generation? How do we challenge things that need to be challenged within a family structure, but still in a way that holds space for us to be part of that space? And we don't want to be so woke, and we don't want to be so liberated and so freedom that we all liberated alone. Liberation is a community effort. And if you've arrived, but you turn back and nobody there with you, then that decolonization process isn't complete. You have to be in some form of community at the end of the journey. That is the purpose. The whole purpose of decolonization is to get away from that individualism and return to earth, return to community, return to that love and that space of like, we're all in it. All of us are in it, in our tribe, return to that tribe. And so the third thing I'm going to say for how we can decolonize our space and our practice ourselves in our lives is to really return to what we used to value in our ancestry. What do our ancestors value? What does our lineage and our heritage value? And when I say ancestors, I'm not talking about specific individuals only, like your grandpa, or I'm talking about your people. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do your people believe? Who are your people? What do they value? What do they love? What do they challenge? What do they resist? Because I think a lot of times we want to decolonize our space, but we have very white ways of thinking and being. And even like the way that we challenge our liberatory spaces is very white. So as an example, when I was younger, I really wanted to challenge notions of patriarchy, and I still do, right? And so like what I did, being a young person, is when my auntie, who's like a lot older, she's an elder, she was asking the women to cook and clean, and she was not asking the men to do the same. And I would just like belligerently just like told her in front of everyone, like, this is so sexist and blah blah blah. And I said it, very loud and very publicly, with no respect to her as an elder. And so it's like my cause was right? I still believe that. It's still, she was wrong for that. But the way that I communicated that was so white. And it was so centered in whiteness. And it was so centered in like Americanized culture. It was not ancestral. It's not ancestral for us to belligerently and publicly and openly disagree with the elders without a proper channel, right? There's proper channels to discussing. And I understand, the toxicity of like just quietly submitting to the elders. We don't want that either. So it's like, how do we challenge these patriarchal notions in a way that still honors the ancestral tradition of honoring your elders and giving them that space, that the fact that they've lived here longer, the fact that they've survived here longer, they know some things. And while they may be wrong in some things, there are still ways in which we can approach it in a way that reflects who we are as a people and not who the colonizer has turned us to be.